Thank you for coming, everyone, and welcome to our fifth meeting of our future in Catalonia. Catalonia. I'm sorry, I'm used to saying it in Catalan. We started as a group over 18 months ago, and we've reached a little bit over 100 members now on our meetup group. So please tell your friends about our meetup group and invite anyone who wants to know about the process or is completely unfamiliar about the process. It would be great to have you here to start a discussion and everything. That was basically the purpose of the group to begin with. Basically, we want this space to be an open forum where anyone who is completely ignorant of the process or is continuing to be a follower or who has a complete disbelief in the process as well, we welcome everyone. So it really doesn't matter what side you're on. This is why we have our debate today. And just to remind you, the debate is about the pros and cons of the Catalan process between the 27th of September elections and the 20th of December elections, the upcoming elections. And for the next year, we're planning on doing at least 3 more events, more or less. I forgot exactly what topics. I think Uriel can be more elaborate about that later on. But at least for next year, we will have 3 more events. I'm one of the organizers on the meetup group. I'm a little bit more behind the scenes than anyone, but originally I'm from the United States and settled down here around 2 years ago. I was drawn to Catalonia because of the passion of the Catalonian people. I didn't really understand anything about the independence process or what on earth was going on here, and the majority of my friends back in the United States also are completely ignorant of that. So that's why I came here, wanting to be a part of this process, to understand it and, well, help it along as well. And, oh yes. Admittedly, I'm still learning about the process as well because I've only been here for about 2 years, but hopefully this is why I come to debates like this. So I'm also with you on this journey to understand, to know more about what's going on. So our MC for tonight is Adrià Alsina. Am I saying that right?
That's perfect. That's
okay.
Perfect.
Sorry about that. He is a Catalan Portuguese journalist and a political commentator, he has been seen on TV and radio, and now is based in Barcelona. So we are very grateful to have him here tonight to moderate the debates. And with that said, here's Adrià.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Tammy. Well, good evening, and thank you very much for being here at this Old Theatre's beautiful bar with microphones that don't work. So as Tammy said, my name is Adrià Alsina. I'm a journalist and communication consultant, and I'm really glad to be here today because we are trying to shed a bit of light into the consequences, positive or negative, of the so-called independence process, the process of Catalonia. And I'm very glad that the folks at the meetup group, Our Future in Catalonia, asked me to moderate this debate, because this allows me to sit here between these 2 heavyweights, intellectual heavyweights, just to make it clear. On my right, there is Miquel Strubell. And, well, I think I will not surprise anyone if, and let alone you, Miquel, if I define you as a strong supporter of independence. Is that right?
Okay, fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll take that.
Strong supporter, very strong supporter, even so.
Naturally.
So first question goes to you today. In 30 seconds.
Okay.
Why do you support independence?
I don't support independence generically, because most countries are already independent, so they don't need supporting. I support independence for Catalonia, so I'm being facetious here. Basically because Catalonia, the Catalans are a people. The peoples have a right to self-determination. And in my firm belief is that within Europe, Catalonia and the Catalan people can only hope to survive in this highly competitive world if the Catalans can rule over their own destiny. In other words, make all the decisions, including involvement with international organizations, without interference from outside. Is that okay?
I think so. Well, Mr. Strubell is a co-founder of ANC, the Catalan National Assembly. You might have heard of it, this grassroots organization that lobbies for independence, and that has used us to monster demonstrations at the Meridiana this year and all over the place in the last years. Besides, Mr. Strubell holds a degree from Oxford and Barcelona as well, and has published several books, mainly about linguistics. So please, Mr. Strubell, take it easy on us, because we are not native English speakers as you are. So please be sympathetic to our efforts here. Well, on my left, there is Yannis Karagiannis. Yes, Karagiannis. I must admit I had to practice last night, and I had to ask him exactly how to pronounce it. Well, Mr. Karagiannis is a political scientist specializing in the politics of the European Union. He's a PhD by the University of Florence, Italy, and you might have seen him on TV recently because, well, sadly, his country has run into a bit of trouble in the last years, Greece. But regarding Catalonia's independence, I think we can define Mr. Karagiannis as a skeptic. Would you find yourself comfortable with that definition?
As a skeptic and a phobic.
Skeptic and a phobic. I'm noting this down. Skeptic and phobic. All right.
So it's the way in Britain you have the Eurosceptics and the Europhobics. I'm somewhere between the two.
So just as Miquel did, would you just expand a little bit on this skepticism and phobia you have for Catalan independence in 30 seconds?
Yeah, I think that it's a rhetorical trick to say that the Catalan people are one people and they're entitled to independence or things. It's very difficult to define exactly what the Catalan people, who the Catalan people are. Is it those who speak Catalan? Is it those who live and work in Catalonia? But then would you exclude those who don't speak Catalan in the first definition? In the second one, would you exclude those who do not live in Catalonia but may feel Catalan? So that's a definitional problem. And then I think that empirically speaking, so if you observe the preferences of people when you see election results and you see that there's just too much opposition to it. So independence. So assuming that those who are in favor of independence manage to organize a lot better than those who are against it, they would do something which just imposes too high a cost on those who are against it.
All right, we will get back to this. Just for the record, oh, now it's working, yeah. Just for the record, I believe it is no secret to most of you that I am in favor of independence, but to be fair, I think people who don't know it must know it at this point. But I'm not here today to support my arguments, but rather to support and challenge Mr. Strubell and Mr. Karagiannis is here. So I will try and not come forward with no arguments of my own tonight. This debate will last for 45 minutes. We've already consumed about 3 or 4. After that, we on this table will have to shut up and listen to your concerns, questions and critics. And Mr. Strubell and Mr. Karagiannis will be more than happy to answer, explain, either refute or even debunk some myths if necessary. I hope this will be an exciting debate. So let's get it started. So to move forward on a bit what you said before, well, we've got elections. We had elections on September 27th. Roughly 48% voted in favor of independence, and there are 72 MPs out of 135 that are pro-independence. So I open the question to both of you. Is there a majority for independence just yet or no?
I think that's unquestionable. 48% of the electorate accepted that this was a plebiscite. 52% perhaps didn't accept that it was a plebiscite. And that 48% in favour of the pro-independence coalitions is far greater than the parties who are out-and-out pro-union parties. There's about 11-12% segment of the electorate that didn't get involved in the yes or no argument at all.
The Catalunya seeker spot.
The Catalunya seeker spot, and who are closely related to Iniciativa per Catalunya, who are utterly in favour of a referendum and the right of self-determination for the Catalans. But in terms of yes, no, and we don't know, the yes was clearly ahead of the others and has an outright majority in the Parliament.
So your point is that there's a clear block that says yes, there's another clear block that says no, and there's something in between that says nor yes nor no. So I guess, Mr. Karagiannis, you've got something to say about this. What's about this block that says yes or no, neither yes nor no?
This is not a vote in favour of independence. If they had wanted to vote for independence, they would have voted for one of the parties which supported them. I'm almost speechless when I hear that argument. If these people had wanted to vote for independence, given that there was this kind of plebiscitary nature in these elections, they would just have done so. I mean, there's nothing. There are very few things. We are very controlled in this society, right? And when you're against things, you're really afraid to speak up. Or perhaps in other places where you're in favour of things. So perhaps. So I'm thinking about some Catalan nationalists in Madrid. Same, I guess they're as they feel as oppressed as perhaps those who are in favour of the constitution and of some kind of social democracy within the constitutional framework we have now. But there was one moment where they could have done it in total freedom. No one was watching what they were doing. That was in the ballot box, and they could have voted for a party in favour of independence. That was the only issue in the electoral campaign. Forget about whether the green or yellow or whatever, and they want to protect the environment or not. Those elections were about independence. If they had wanted independence, they would have voted for one of those parties. I don't know.
So your point, you also said that we are kind of oppressed here. Is that what you were saying as well?
Oh yeah.
So
I'm saying that we are. So I'll tell you analytically why I'm saying we're oppressed, because the entire debate is always set as being in favour or against independence, and the kind of vote they want us to believe that we have to exercise is whether we're in favour or against independence. There's no middle road. There's no third way. There's no. Are you in favour perhaps of a more federal system? Right now that and the fact that they interpret everything in terms of whether you voted for or against, and they don't let people choose between perhaps 3 or 4 or 5 alternatives. But some people have the agenda power to tell us you have to vote between yes and no.
So this
is a kind of oppression. Even within that system of right, not even being able to influence the agenda in the sense of creating 3 alternatives, and then you'd see that things would be a lot more ambiguous. Even within that setup, you find that there's a majority of people who could have voted for a party in favour of independence, and they didn't.
So let me jump back to Miquel on this. Do you agree that maybe there were too few options, that this yes and no sort of plebiscite was too limiting for people?
The yes-no was what the pro-independence parties wanted in the form of a referendum. And they tried to hold this referendum in 2014, but it wasn't possible. The next best thing, the only thing that the Spanish authorities couldn't stop, even though they wanted to, was an ordinary parliamentary election in Catalonia. So in terms of what was written on the paper, the discourse in legal terms was it was just an ordinary parliamentary election. Several of the options said, we are standing for independence. Several other options said, we're not standing for independence, we will be standing for a federal system, that's Unió Democràtica, or for the right to decide, which was Catalunya sí que es pot, and the socialists also believe in a kind of federal system. PP don't believe in anything except for more centralization and are the main culprits for the situation we've got to here. And I think I've gone across the board, basically. So I don't think anyone set the agenda as such. Each party was free to decide whether to join the yes or the no sides. And both Unió Democràtica and Catalunya sí que es pot said before and after the election, we don't want our votes to be counted either as yes votes or no votes.
All right, so let's move on to the party that actually won the election, even if it didn't win it by an absolute majority. Junts pel Sí, they said, we've got a plan. We've got a plan. In 18 months, we are going to be independent, sort of. I wanted to ask you whether, well, you consider, have you read this plan? Do you know what this plan is about? Can you explain it in your own words, and also tell us whether this plan or no plan is actually feasible or not? Who wants to get first there?
Do you want to start? Or shall I?
I can start. Thank you. Just let me say something to clarify things. Mm-hmm. I think regarding the elections of the 27th of September, I think that we face a situation. We have to interpret these elections, right? I think everyone agrees that there's no clear majority of the kind that Artur Mas was hoping for. He was talking about ample social majorities, not only 2 years ago, but even in Sitges in July, right? Mm-hmm. He was talking about ample social majorities. Now, we enter into that logic of a referendum kind of, or a plebiscitary elections, however you want to call it. Mm-hmm. And then those who are in favor of independence, clearly in favor of independence, and who want to give the elections this character of, plebiscitary character, gain about 49% of the vote. I can't remember exactly how much they got, right? And then they say, oh, yeah. So it was a little bit like a referendum, so perhaps we should have got 50, but since it was not actually a referendum, our 48 is still fine, is still enough. And you say, where are the ample social majorities that you were talking about? And do we help me interpret this? Was it a referendum? Was it not a referendum? Was it a plebiscite or was it not? Well, I know you want to win anyway. I know, but so they were a little bit like telling you that, if I win, I win, and if I gain, I'll spin it in a way that sounds like I won, kind of thing. It doesn't take out of the picture the fact that half of the population, you don't want to say half, 45% of the population, you don't want to say 43% of the population is massively opposed to that. What will you do with these people?
All right.
What will you do? No, but it's very important because it affects the way the process is going to go now. Mm-hmm. Because
so
of the
stay with the percentages then. No, what I was asking is, all right, we got this point across. So you think there's no clear majority. Miquel kind of thinks there is a majority. Truth is, we do have a majority of MPs at Parliament, and they do need to do something, at least. Whether it's their original program, or maybe they have to spin it or twist it somehow. And that's sort of what I was trying to ask you now. I mean, there was a plan. There was an 18 months plan. That's what the program that they presented to the elections. So my question now would be, well, after this, what's the plan? What's the plan of Junts pel Sí? What's the plan of CUP? And what the plan would be if they finally reach an agreement between Junts pel Sí and La CUP, and therefore achieve this majority of MPs, which definitely legitimizes them to at least do some policy.
I think a lot of radical pro-independence votes went to the CUP because it's a radical party and who are in favour of a UDI. In other words, just as long as we have a parliamentary majority, we declare independence in the parliament, and we just forget about Spain. Whereas Junts pel Sí is a more moderate, time-consuming process. So I think a lot of people voted for the CUP, so the process would in fact go faster than intended by the majority of the votes that went in the end to the pro-independence Junts pel Sí. This 18-month plan, I think, is being worked out in detail now between the two. They're not two parties, they're two coalitions, of course. And that at the end of the day, we don't know what day, an announcement will be made. I doubt we will be publicly told about everything, in the same way that Wellington obviously didn't give his battle plans to Napoleon before the Battle of Waterloo. You know, I mean, there are some things you have to keep to yourself, because otherwise you would be helping an adversary who is playing pretty dirtily, not doing what unionists have done for a century and a half, which is if you don't like it, you just declare war, you have a pronunciamiento, coup d'etat, or an invasion, which has been the tradition in Spain, was the tradition in Spain up until 1981, which I think was the last time when non-democratic ways out were sought. So at least, let's say, the Spanish unionist side is being restrained in some ways, but it's using the media as much as it can, and I'm going well beyond an answer to your question, in trying to influence public opinion. And until public opinion can get in Catalonia and in Spain, I'm almost as concerned about public opinion in Spain as I am about public opinion in Catalonia. Until public opinion can get both sides of the story in as objective, can we be objective? But anyway, in an opener way as possible, I don't think things will move forward the way they should.
What do you think? Things are moving forward or not? Or what is even to move forward?
I think, I don't know, I have some difficulty from the beginning, because I don't know whether I should object to what the other debater is saying, for example, about Spain's tradition in suppressing, I don't know, minority nationalism by bringing in the army, or I think.
You can object.
Or whether I should answer your question. But
you can object, but if you object, you will lose precious time to answer the question as well.
Okay, but I want to object. I will object then because
feel free to object to whatever you need to object.
This goes to the core of the debate. Mm-hmm. I think that if you portray the Catalans as a freedom-loving, progressive, European and worldly kind of people who are entitled to certain things, and the Spanish are a bunch of Francoist Bárcenas, who might come in with a then I would, if that caricature was really good, I would also be a secessionist. Mm-hmm. I'm afraid that Spain is not anymore the kind of country that many secessionists in Catalonia think or like to imagine it like. Right? I think Spain has changed a lot. I think Spain had started changing even before the death of Franco. Spain had admitted and was fine with perhaps not absolutely fine, but they had admitted certain things happening in Catalonia, including the creation of Omnium Cultural, including the Nova Cançó and all these things. So these things were, so there was no oppression anymore, and that's not because of Spain or because they were good. They were a bunch of bastards, right? We're talking about the Spanish government in the 1960s. But what was happening is that the world was changing. You just didn't do these things anymore, right? And the way you don't do these things anymore, it's exactly the same. They wouldn't do it now. I mean, just to bring the Spanish thing like that, you know, Bárcenas is going to come with a Kalashnikov and will kill you if you do things. This is just too easy, right? I think Spain is not like that, and I think that if our motivation is some kind of caricature and some hatred we have of Spain, then we might need to reconsider, right? But that's now regarding the process.
Sorry, but now that you said this, I need to move forward, back to Miquel for a second, because you said something that's a bit hard. You talked about hatred between Catalonia and Spain, and I would like to move back to Miquel and know about his opinion on that fact. Is there any sort of hatred between Catalonia and Spain, between Spain and Catalonia, between its elites, between the peoples, between governments?
Beyond Barcelona, Real Madrid, you mean?
Beyond Barcelona, Real Madrid, which was a great game on Saturday.
Yeah, it was.
Most of us had a lot of fun watching it.
Hatred, I just don't like the word, but I wrote it down in my notes because I have hundreds and hundreds of statements by people who are old enough to know better saying things against the Catalans which would have ended up in any court, in Greece or Belgium or Britain or anywhere, and all of them have gone off stock-free without any kind of professional or social sanction at all. I'm talking about opinion leaders, not about tweeters, because on Twitter and Facebook and so on you get loonies, and that has no, let's say, it's not the same level. I don't think hatred is being fostered here against Spain at all. So many people here have relatives living in Spain or from Spain. So many people go to Spain for their Rioja and their jamón and to see friends, and I don't think that has happened at all. What I do think has happened is that the Spanish media have been used to convey the impression that Catalonia is fostering hatred, that the Catalan pro-independence movement is basically a bunch of people who learnt from the Nazis, that we are a bunch of intolerant people, that there's pensamiento único going on here. When you look at the statistics of people speaking in talk shows on one side or the other of the independence debate, in Catalan radio stations, TV, and in the rest of Spain, the difference is remarkable. So I don't like the word hate at all, but I have seen plenty of things which remind me of what went on in Serbia before the Balkan Wars. And no one dreamt that there could be a Balkan War, in the same way that I cannot possibly imagine, after the 1981 attempt, that people would resort to violence anymore here.
See, we've only been 20 minutes here, and already the Nazis and Serbia and Yugoslavia have come out in the debate. It's funny now, because I was really looking forward to this part of the debate, because both of you are kind of experts in nationalism, nations, and I really wanted to ask you whether you think we are witnessing a sort of nationalistic confrontation here, because in some senses none of the parts seem to admit there's any nationalism involved in their positions. In Spain, in Madrid, they don't even acknowledge a Spanish nationalism, yet they erected this monster flag in downtown in the city, and they call themselves constitutionalists. And here in Catalonia, again, people tend not to consider themselves as nationalists, but there clearly is a component to language, culture. What's your take on this? And let's move back to Yannis.
My take on this is that a segment of Spanish public opinion is certainly nationalist and is certainly not respectful of peripheral nationalisms. So I've heard weird things when I was interviewing people in Spain. Some of them, for example, think that the Catalans started speaking Catalan just a couple of years ago just to piss off the Spanish.
Yeah.
You get these things. There's a lot of paranoia there, and there's certainly this kind of dominating nationalism. There's also a lot of nationalism in Catalonia. So since I'm the bad guy here, I will talk about the bad aspects of Catalan nationalism.
I wouldn't say you're the bad guy.
Okay, the constitutionalist guy.
I assume everybody in this table would like Catalonia to be a better place 10 years from now.
And Spain.
And Spain as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so the
Greece.
Forget Greece. That's okay.
Portugal.
And Portugal.
So
At least I have somewhere to run away.
the Catalan nationalism is not only nationalistic, which it's not just a civic form of nationalism. It's an oppressive form of nationalism because if you just take official speeches, right, you'll see that Catalonia is always portrayed as one kind of unitary actor, which is permanently being attacked by someone else. Right? So it's just doing away with all the enormous complexity which makes up this society. It's right. So basically, it's that thing of having 52% of voters not voting for a secessionist party, and nevertheless saying, it's a clear victory of secessionists. You just forget about the rest. That's one thing. And the second thing, to see that it's not only that, it's not only an oppressive form of all nationalism are. The Spanish one is oppressive as well. The Greek one, and I'd say anything you want about Greece. It's horrible. I don't want to live in Greece. But it's also an ethnic form of nationalism, right? That it's a nationalism where I can tell you stories that I'm sure would make you cry about things that my wife has been told for being of Spanish origin. Like a long-time medical doctor. So after her father died, the doctor of her father's, he had been for a long time in hospital because... So he passed away, and then the doctor comes and says, so he didn't have enough time to go back to Spain and live with his Catalan pension, right? And her father had just died, right? So he hadn't had enough time to go back to Spain and live with his Catalan pension, right?
I think one last
thing. How the debate is ethnic. Apart from that, look at those who got elected for Junts pel Sí. You will see that they have all of them. There's not a single. No, perhaps it's 92% actually. The vast majority of them have purely Catalan surnames. Look at those who were elected for Ciutadans. All of them, this is so massive, as they were joking among themselves in a meeting where I was, they're all charnegos, right? So you have that thing of all the Junts pel Sí guys being Catalan proper with the I in between and all you need, and all the other guys are the Spanish, are those from Santa Coloma and Baix Llobregat. And you have that. And it's not, we shouldn't, so Esquerra Republicana is trying to do something about it now, and I think it's good. So they put this kind of Spanish immigrant kid who knows nothing about politics, but they put him there, to show everyone that they didn't really mean it. It's become ethnic, but we'll make it a little bit less now. But the core of the matter is ethnic, right? The core of them is the probability of being in favor of independence. If you have 4 Catalan-speaking grandparents, is enormous, and the probability of being against independence if you have 4 Spanish-speaking grandparents is enormous. And this is a fact.
All right, this is a fact. Is it a fact?
Lovely. Well, I'm glad you ended up with that. Because the surveys do show that there's a clear differentiation with a very fuzzy border. I mean, you can find people called Strubell, or Sanchez, who are in favor of independence, and you can find someone called Bosch, who is against independence. So let's say,
for those who don't know that, Jordi Sanchez is the president of the Catalan National Assembly, and Josep Ramon Bosch used to be, up until a couple of weeks ago, president of Societat Civil Catalana, which is totally against independence.
You're obviously a journalist sitting here between us. Yeah. Okay. No.
Well, just in case, there's always
footnote
who might not know it.
Yeah. I like to think that this is basically identity origin for Ciutadans, and I'm glad you mentioned them, because let's say we are all sons and grandchildren of our ancestors, let's say, to start with, but then we live. We may be born with a language, but we learn another language and 2 or 3 more languages. So I think, let's say, by default, you would expect people with Catalan surnames, by default, to be more, let's say, sensitive to what they regard as the needs of this part of the world, and you would expect, by default, people who have non-Catalan surnames. Sorry, I mean, there are some surnames like García, which have been in Catalonia for 4 or 5 centuries. Most of them haven't, but there are exceptions. So again, there's that fuzzy line. You'd expect people with non-Catalan surnames, by default, to start with, to identify with a territory which isn't the territory of Catalonia. But then life goes on, we all change, and my impression is that the longer people have been here, the longer people's families have been here, the more they tend to identify with this particular part of the world, not as being better, not as being worse. Is this nationalism? Well, there we're getting to the crux of the matter. As from, let's say, from a position of a social psychologist, I would say probably not, provided, let's say, one's own identity isn't seen as being superior to the identity of someone else. I abhor the example of that doctor. Tell me who he is, and I'll go and slap him on the face. I think that is shameful. And it's no excuse to say that I have examples in the other direction.
No,
I mean,
of course.
obviously, that's not the point at all. We should all be more tolerant, and particularly a lot more sensitive.
All right, so we've been here for half an hour.
Are there any goals?
Any goals?
Any Barca goals?
No, not yet. I wanted to take advantage that the game has not yet begun, and the audience is still around here, because I wanted to ask you a question. I would like to ask you there whether you believe that independence is likely to happen in the next, let's say, in the next 2 years, or it is not likely to happen in the next 2 years, as, for instance, the Deutsche Bank said last week. So those who please believe that independence is likely or very likely to happen in the last 2 years, could you raise your hands? Right, we got.
It's possible.
Well, yeah, I said likely, not necessarily sure. Huh? All right, we've got, maybe about 40%, and I assume the rest think it's not likely to happen.
Not necessarily.
Who does think it's not likely to happen in the next 2 years? All right. So I'd say it's another 40%. So it's like the election. Yeah? we got 2 40%, and then we got an undecided 15-20%. All right.
So it will happen for sure. If it's like the election, it will happen for sure.
Don't try to make me say things that I didn't say. Now, so now I'm asking you. Do you think it's likely to happen in the next 2 years. Now I think it's Yannis' turn.
I'm afraid it may happen. Yes, I'm very afraid. Not because I'm against independence as such. I can tell you different conditions which would convince me that independence is not such a bad thing. I'm not a priori. I'm against it because I think that it's a lack of solidarity, particularly in difficult economic times. Had the Catalans, I mean the nationalist Catalans, not the others, but had the nationalist Catalans asked for it when the Spanish economy was booming like no one's business, I would have said, you know, these guys have their cultural issues, whatever, perhaps they will compensate the losers so well that, you know, whatever. But when they tried to do that during the worst economic recession that Spain has gone through since the 1940s, makes me, you know, really makes me view it as a lack of loyalty and you know, you have a man in the street who's suffering and you go and kick them because you're the wealthiest and you don't want them to be there in your way. I think really it's not an elegant timing. Now so
I don't think if Miquel would agree that he's
perhaps he won't.
kicking people on the street, but go ahead.
Not yet, anyway. What date would you fix for the economic crisis, more or less?
Well, it's 2008, 2009.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
That's when it starts.
Okay,
If these nationalists had been in power for a long time, if they had asked it when the Spanish economy was booming, I would have, you know, they might. But when they ask it and when they mobilize people because everyone is unemployed, it's just so easy and it's such a lack of solidarity with everyone else that for me, it doesn't make it very sympathetic. So it's the wealthiest who come and see Spain suffering so much and then they press on the. But having said that, I think that it might happen and that would be bad news. Why? So no, let me take my so I was saying that I think that as a general idea, I think the timing is bad, but overall, I don't think that if it had happened in 2004 or 2005 or 2006, that it would have been so bad, provided there was a plan to compensate the losers, provided there was a plan for all those who do not want independence to compensate it. It's exactly like in trade policy. When you raise your tariffs, for instance, or when you bring down your tariffs, so if you were in a protectionist policy and now you go into a free trade policy, you compensate the losers. You compensate all those who will be hurt by globalization. This every democratic country does that. It's the same with the Catalan independence. If it ever happened, there should be a plan there to compensate all those millions who do not want it. What would that plan be? I've never heard anything. I know there's a debate regarding whether Spanish should be retained as an official language or not, and you have Esquerra Republicana who fortunately now say that, yeah, we can perhaps retain it, but you have Omnium Cultural and Casals and all these people who are very influential say, no, we shouldn't. But apart from that, what would be the compensation for those people? You have about half the population. You want to call it 40%. You want to call it 30%. I'm fine, whatever. Right? What will you give them? Will you just say, forget about them? Is that the new Catalonia you want? Is to forget about 30 or 40 or 50% of the population?
Let me move it back to Miquel. I think he was here like trying to get back on track. I think you got a couple of things to say.
Yeah, Yannis, I'm really grateful because we're getting to the bone of a number of important issues. And I asked you when you thought the economic crisis started. I mean, everyone knows, because I want to do a little bit of running through the agenda that's led to where we are now.
Try not to be too extensive.
Very synthetic. In 2007, 3 things happened. A very influential journalist said the caricature of a Catalan now is el català emprenyat. The average Catalan is angry. Okay? talk about dignity, humiliation, whatever you like, if you like, another time. We have, at the same time, the president of Catalonia talking about desafección. The president of Catalonia was a socialist, born in Granada, and who was couldn't possibly be suspected as being a nationalist or Catalanista in any way. He was warning Madrid that there's desafecto going on. People are just turning off from Spain. And in the same year, I was one of probably 100, 150,000 people that took part in a demonstration in central Barcelona to complain about the disastrous state of infrastructures that the Spanish government should be modernizing the whole time, and particularly as a result of the local train services, which were collapsing day in, day out because of the lack of investment. This is 2007, okay? The boom is still there. We have lots of people really angry, lots of people annoyed, lots of people turning off. Why did I go to that demonstration? I never take a local train. I don't need to. I live in the centre of a city. I'm a middle-class person, and yet I identify strongly with people who do have to catch a train every day and get really annoyed, and they may well not be Catalan speakers, may well not have been born in Catalonia. Another thing, much more recently.
So you identify with the Ciudadanos vote? Voters.
Well, I mean, it's just a different dimension, if you like.
Okay.
I identify with people, and I identify with all people, and I identify particularly with people who are going to suffer from the cold this winter because they can't afford to pay for hot water and electricity. So I want a government that says I'm going to lay down a decree which will force electricity companies to give them free electricity so they don't suffer the cold in the winter. I think we would all agree that's a good government. Well, the Catalan government did publish a decree saying that, and the Spanish government blocked it. So again, I'm middle class. I'm not going to get cold in the middle, and I have a Catalan pension, okay? And I will carry on having a Catalan pension after independence, and Madrid will still have to pay for that Catalan pension, and Prime Minister Rajoy actually had to finally admit that until he sits down and negotiates an arrangement which will allow Spain not to go bankrupt.
Sorry, Miquel. Let me also go back on something that Yannis was saying. He was saying there is no plan. There is no plan for what independence would look like. There is no plan for what whether winners or losers, if you want to use those terms or not, would be treated like. Do you feel like there's a plan? There's no plan. We're just, going towards, and then we don't really know what it will look like.
I had a lunch with, well, there were 30 other people as well. But anyway, we invited to lunch the man in the Catalan government who's responsible for organising the whole of the transition over to an independent state, which is a crucial period. We don't want legal uncertainty. We don't want companies suddenly to say, well, do I have to pay taxes anymore or not? Or do I have to show a passport or pay trade tariffs at the border? And he said that the international advisors to the whole process had been amazed and had never seen any other secession process which had been so carefully designed, so well defined, foreseeing, envisaging all the steps that have to be taken for legal certainty to be found. That doesn't mean the design of the new country, obviously. And I think we were all in the dynamic of a bottom-up design, which will be much more responsive to what the people want, and much less top-down, which is very much a tradition of the Spanish elite.
All right, Yannis, just a very quickly re-answer to Miquel.
If you like.
We are starting to run out of time.
As far as I know, but perhaps I'm wrong, there is no tradition of the Spanish elite being top-down in any which is in any significant way different from any other European tradition. France is top-down, Bismarck united Germany, Garibaldi united Italy. Everything is top down. There's no country in the kind of complex societies with, and obviously there's also a bottom up movement, and you have these things. Spain is no different. Spain has many rights, including the abolition of the death penalty, gay marriage, all these kind of things that Europeans were looking towards, and they were hoping they would be like Spain. So saying that Spain might be the kind of Francoist, top-down country that is nice for us to believe if we're secessionists is a little bit too easy, I think. That's one thing. Second, regarding the future of Catalonia, which is our debate here, and not the past of Spain, is the future of Catalonia. Should Spanish-speaking people, or those who choose it, even if they're Catalan-speaking, in the future Catalan Republic, should they have the right to send their kids to Spanish-only schools? Should there be, because 54% of the population speaks Spanish at home and not Catalan in Catalonia, should these people be able to send their kids to Spanish-only schools?
Well, I believe
No,
our friends of Our Future in Catalonia should be bringing a couple of MPs next time so that they can discuss whether they want to pass laws on that or not.
This is the kind of rights that the Catalans have in the current constitution, right? And I think it's very good.
Sorry?
I think public schooling in Catalonia should be in Catalan, 100%. I'm very happy. My kids go to Catalan-speaking school, and I'm very happy with that. The only thing I'm asking is, okay, now fast forward, go to the Catalan Republic. Should the Spanish population within Catalonia have the same rights that Catalans had within Spain, or not? I don't have an answer to that. They just tell me that everyone will have ice cream every day. But I don't have an answer to that. And you know what? Many Catalanist friends of mine, when I tell them about that, say, that creates a real dilemma. If we respect minority rights in the new Catalan Republic, but then we might have this kind of end of immersió lingüística, so an end of a policy which works and which is a good policy, and you may have a Catalonia, a kind of divided society, or you have a state that brings everyone together and oppresses that kind of new minority you might have, right? Which one's better? This is a big debate that should be up there, and we should be talking about that. I haven't heard anything about that.
Well, you're bringing it up right here, so it's
it's not a very difficult thing to bring up, right? I don't know, but it's we are promised, this Asamblea Nacional thing that we'll have everything. There will be no poor people without heating in the winter, and we will all have ice cream in the summer, etc., etc. But what about what about the public policies we'll be running? I know we'll be wealthier. So if you believe it or not, that
Yannis, you've made your point there.
Okay.
We've made. Because I just wanted to move forward for a bit more, 5 minutes more, 5 more minutes about whether this is an opportunity, a challenge, or a situation, yet another problem for the European Union. There has been a lot of talks about whether Catalonia would be or not within the European Union. We will not debate this right now, but I'm more interested, and probably people are more interested now to know whether you see this as a potentially good thing for Europe, or simply just something that can happen, or again, yet another problem that would add to lifting barriers, which is another discourse that's been done also in the European Union. I don't know if Miquel, you want to start with this?
Yeah, I think Catalonia is a miracle in Europe, in the sense that I don't think there's any other people with their own language, with their own culture, with their own tradition, with their own history of the scale of the Catalans that doesn't have their own state. I mean, let's say if there were people of that scale without a state, they have been assimilated. They've disappeared. So I think the Catalans are a little miracle, if you like, on their own. So I think it would probably be easier for Europe to try and avoid problems, to try and solve problems before they become conflicts, and therefore to force the various parties to sit down and to hammer out solutions, including the issue of national minorities, although, you know, what are the national minority in terms of sort of international standards is there in Catalonia other than the Occitans in the valley of Aran? I mean, that's a separate issue. I think...
so the Spanish are not a national minority?
You say the Spanish. I'm Spanish. You mean people who came here from pueblos in Extremadura, Andalucía in the 20s? They're all totally Catalanized with their Spanish surnames. The people who came here in the 60s, people came here in the 70s, people came here in the 80s from India, from West Africa. I don't
Everyone's
like
a Catalan and there are no Spanish.
I guess Yannis is referring mainly to people who consider themselves mainly as Spanish rather than Catalan, living in Catalonia.
That is perfectly acceptable. Obviously, I'm not going to force any identity on anyone in the same way that you know, Catalans have suffered many times in the past for being ignored or just being told we didn't exist. I mean, the Catalans do not exist as a people under the Spanish Constitution now, for instance. So I think Europe will try and avoid problems if possible, and try and get the Spanish government and the Catalan government, particularly if the Catalan government can move on its path. Sooner or later, it has to show the world that a majority, however you define a majority, will vote in favour of independence at the polls. Sooner or later. I think that would probably be with a draft constitution having been written. I agree with your top-down, but I think the bottom-up side of Catalan society has been very much stronger because there are tremendously important institutions, even in Catalonia, that were built from underneath. They weren't built with state funding. The tradition here is being bottom up as being much stronger. So I would expect the European Union and the Central European Bank to really force the two sides to hammer out solutions, particularly for the pensions and particularly for the sovereign debt, which are the two really big problems on the international scene. And I think a kind of transitional period would be worked out, which wouldn't mean now you're outside the euro and then you can come back in the euro. Now you have to pay tariffs and now you don't have to pay tariffs anymore, which would be absolutely crazy. I think it would be suicidal.
Yannis, what do you think? Is this an opportunity, a challenge? Europe sees it as a problem? You have been studying the European Union for a long time, so quite a qualified opinion there.
I think that as an empirical matter, the European Union obviously sees that as a problem. I'm not saying. I think perhaps they should be a little bit more open-minded. Perhaps not see it exclusively as a problem. But as an empirical matter, they clearly see it as a problem, right? Because if this happens here, then it might also happen in the Basque Country. It might also happen eventually in Scotland. It might also happen in Wales. It might also happen in Brittany and Corsica. And perhaps Padania, and you name it, right? And for the European Union, this kind of, they're trying to basically infiltrate states to make them kind of evaporate. And now you're trying to create more states. This is what Eurocrats will fear, right? That you're not proposing a kind of European federalist solution. What you're proposing is more nationalism and more state-run nationalism. So in that sense, they will certainly view it as a problem. Mm-hmm. Perhaps they shouldn't. Perhaps they should, I don't know, create some think tank and come up with positive solutions, right? But that's a different thing. It's I don't know what they should be doing, but I know that they certainly see it as a problem.
Can I answer?
All right, very quickly.
To build on what you're saying, I think Spain is absolutely unique compared to Canada, compared to Scotland. There haven't been many other cases in recent years of strong pro-independence movements. But Spain is unique in not having done a single part of a fraction of a step towards trying to seduce the Catalans away from the independence movement. Nothing has been done. If anything, the situation has been aggravated. And again, I think that comes from the Madrid elite, ordeno y mando tradition, which says if you have a problem, it's your problem, and you solve it, rather than the more North European way of dealing with things is you have a problem, let's sit down and discuss it and try and find a solution.
All right, so we are closing this part of the session. I just wanted to repeat a couple of sentences that you guys have said this evening. I think, Yannis, you synthesized pretty well the two discourses that are in the air here in Catalonia. On one side, you said, well, there's going to be this Francoist Bárcenas who is going to come with a Kalashnikov and start firing everyone. And on the other hand, this other discourse that we will be having ice cream every day. And I would really like this, actually. I don't know whether the Kalashnikov or the ice cream. And Miquel, you were very, very, very optimistic. You said Catalonia is a miracle, which is kind of an interesting metaphor. And well, you got you made a promise here, and maybe Yannis should tell you, because you said you are going to slap Yannis's doctor if Yannis told you his name.
Definitely.
So you better live up to your compromises there. Huh?
In front of the camera.
In front of the camera, of course, in front of the whole world. So we're closing this part in which mainly we're talking here on the table, on stage, and I would like to open the discussion, and you may have some questions, critics, something that's surprised. We got a question over there. Please, may we know your name? Fabio.
My question is, how do you think that these priorities would affect the process of independence, or whatever process will it be? And in the other way around, how you think this process would affect the way we organize a better police forces or prevention in general?
All right, so if I get it right, and so that everybody hears it, and also folks watching it on video, you're asking, basically, you lay out an international scenario that is pretty scary at the moment, terrorism, all sorts of conflicts, and how this international scenario is shaping or is not shaping the current debate over independence, and how this scenario could affect the way the new state would have to be created if eventually it is. You have any answer to this, Yannis?
Of course. The answer is that secession will allow Catalonia to be so wealthy and so democratic that these kind of problems will not even, there'll be so much money to organize the best police force in the world, and the country will be so democratic that everyone will just be loving it internationally, that we won't have this kind of problems. I'm joking.
Yeah, this is the ice cream for everybody answer.
No, I don't know. Personally, I don't know. So Miquel perhaps knows the police force stuff better than I do.
There's a current scenario and there's an independent scenario. In the process, I don't know how much influence it will be. The current scenario is that there is a shocking lack of coordination between the police forces. There was a very severe leak, which in fact was a tip-off by one police force to a group of a cell of terrorists who managed to escape when they were actually being followed by another police force. I won't add fuel to the flames by saying which of the two police forces were involved in each case, and Jordi is nodding his head in the front row. So I think things are not working well now at the coordination level, and I think in the same way that the Ebro River would be better administered internationally, because international treaties require, you can see the Danube River or the Rhine, for instance, that international treaties are, let's say, ensure the interests of all the parties better than the current system where everyone does their own thing, and as the Catalans at the bottom of the river, there's not much left, and they say goodbye to the Delta in a few years. In terms of police forces, I think if we did have neighbouring countries like Portugal, like Andorra even, there would be much more formal coordination between the police forces in this particular issue, which obviously is of tremendous concern.
I also believe that people that have been on the issue and have been in the European institutions, such as Raúl Romeva or Ramon Tremosa, have been on top of this question and probably can answer way more on this sort of concerns. We might invite them another day, maybe. So other people, we had one here.
Yeah, sure.
What's your name?
Brian Griffiths.
Brian? So yeah, basically, when does Europe intervene, and why, and for what causes, and to do what?
Perhaps when a region that has a population of 7.5 million goes bankrupt because it's not getting access to credit, which could happen in the next few weeks, in fact. That kind of crisis could push them into action. My impression is that there's probably even now quite a lot of behind-the-scenes pressure being applied, which we will never know about. Not even political scientists may know about that until future politicians write their memoirs in 30 years' time. I would like to think that there's a lot going on behind the scenes, which it is important that we don't know about. But that is pure speculation.
Yannis?
Yeah, I think this goes. I think this is probably the most interesting question because it touches on something that we said before. So why is Spain not making a counter offer to Catalonia, and therefore why is Spain putting itself in that situation where it might at some point get the Europeans telling it to do something, right? Why is Spain really? So there's one answer, which I guess that would be your I guess. So I'm sorry to be attributing opinions to you, but many secessionist people that I have talked to think that Spain does that because they are irrational and very ideological. So kind of, the Franco Spain top-down command and control kind of thing, right? Others think that Spain does these things because it knows that Catalonia is not a unitary actor made of 7.5 million people. It knows that within Catalonia there's a very big percentage of the population which feels Spanish, and that when things start going tougher, those people will also rise, and there will be an internal kind of conflict within Catalonia, right? And there I think that the Spanish will be able to tell Europeans, you know what? Let the Catalans look at what's going on in Catalonia. It's between the Catalans. It's not me, right? So are you telling me that I should let down my 3 million voters in Catalonia, or those 3 million? Because that's the real difference between. Well, no, there are other differences as well. It's also wealthier than Quebec is compared to Canada, and that Scotland is compared to
The UK.
to the rest of the UK. But the other difference is that there's a very big, a very big Spanish population here, and I think the European Union will be looking at that. We'll be looking at how are the Spanish, those who feel Spanish, behave in that conflict. If it sees that those who feel Spanish have been totally alienated by some lunatic Spanish Madrid policies, then it will press Madrid to do something and find a peaceful way to the independence of Catalonia. If it sees that those who are Spanish in Catalonia remain Spanish, and independently of whether this is the PP government, so it's the conservative government in Madrid doing weird things, they still remain Spanish, then the European Union will not tell Spain, let these people go free, they should be independent. It will never do that.
Actually supporting that statement, you remember that quote of José María Aznar saying Catalonia will break before Spain breaks. I think that clearly states that at least the strategy of the PP goes that way. There's two ladies on the back there. They had a question. First, yep, you, yep. What's your name, please?
The question.
A statement, an open statement.
Do you think that independence or no independence is the question? This is the question.
So, is independence or no independence the question? Are we asleep with the independence debate? Paraphrasing, using your words.
My question is really almost exactly this. So just to give you two perspectives on this, I happen to be a complexity theorist, a change management consultant. And complexity, when you have complex situations, which you have done a great job of articulating how complex everything is, complex systems never break in any other way but in complex ways. Complexity creates complexity. Now tell me why the simple answer of independence is the right answer to fix a complex problem.
So, Miquel, you got the word there.
Okay, I would say there's no answer that under the present circumstances can be given to many of the complex problems that Catalonia has. That is, in my opinion, too many decisions are being made too far away, not bearing in mind the interests of the people. Can I give you just one little example, which isn't that complex? A railway line connecting for goods transport all the way up the Mediterranean coast, linking up all the important ports on the Mediterranean coast to the center of Europe, would be so competitive compared for Far Eastern and Middle Eastern trade coming through the Suez Canal. So competitive because it would cut days off the present voyage that they have to take all the way around to Antwerp or Hamburg in the north of Europe. That simple railway line would be a fantastic investment for Catalonia, independent or otherwise. But that investment is simply not being made because the people who have the money are not putting it there. They're putting it into high-speed trains to the middle of nowhere, stopping in tiny villages and building a structure which will lose hundreds of millions of euros every year forever. Okay? Fairly simple. So I think what we're trying to argue is that a lot of people here feel that the Catalans would be in a better position to solve their own problems by having decision-making processes close to the people.
Well, Yannis, you see, you were not alone here. There's some people that agree with you as well. So I don't know if you want to give some answer as well.
Yeah, I obviously sympathize with your views. Also, as someone who has rather progressive view on issues of redistribution, I think that the issue is not so much whether the wealthiest part of the country should not be solidaristic with the rest of the country and should have developed this kind of ethnic nationalism, etc., etc. Which, by the way, is also, and I sympathize with you on that as well, is also the result of the Spanish Conservative Party and its own nationalism, right? So they have both gone the easy and populist way of trying to play into these passions of nationalism. in a moment, and this also connects to Fabio's question, right? In a moment where the world faces enormous challenges, so free trade with North America, the rise of China, all these things are a lot more important in the grand scale of things. Now, it's just very easy to say that everything is the fault of Spain, and were it not for Spain, so if we were independent, would be better in terms of police force, in terms of railways, in terms of quality of democracy, in terms of quality of schooling, in terms of everything would be so much better. And you wonder, you know, is that so if you have all these solutions, if you know how to do these things, why don't you help Spain do them as well, right? And I think again, it's because it's just very easy to say, no, I just want to be on my own.
So you with the green top jersey there, with the green jumper.
Our comment was about options.
Sorry, your name? Didac. Yeah, we briefly touched upon that. Didac is asking, what do we do? We do, or pro-independence parties do have an MP's majority at Parliament. They fell short of that 50%, but they do have a majority at Parliament, so they do have some legitimacy to do something at least. So Didac is asking, what do they do? What do they have to do, Miquel?
Well, they have to agree in Parliament and form a sufficiently stable government to be able to carry out the roadmap. If they can't do that, then obviously the blockage, let's say, has been created by the Catalan electorate. I don't think it depends so much on Spain, to be quite honest. We spent 30 years pretentiously trying to modernize Spain, to get Spain to do things a way which was more familiar here. Spain was still a very rural agricultural society 40 years ago, a lot of landowners, and the extractive economy in and around the Madrid nucleus was always much stronger, whereas our economy has been much more productive. I think we just gave up any idea of being able to change Spain. The last attempt was the new Statute of Autonomy, which was voted by 89% of Catalan MPs, which is not a bad thing, and which they felt fell within the terms of the Constitution. That was chopped away in the Spanish Parliament, as you know, and it was again chopped after the referendum by the Spanish Constitutional Court. So I think a lot of people have given up any hope of the l'encaix of Catalonia in a federal kind of Spain. In the end, there's two models of Spain. One unitary, constantly centralizing and diluting the periphery, and another which was much more respectful of linguistic, cultural, even national diversity. Well, those two, let's say, Catalans opted for the second one, for obvious reasons, for, as I say, 150 years, and I think most have seen that it's just, there's no way we're going to get it. And the 20th of December, I don't think anyone can see any serious step forward in terms of seducing the Catalans after the elections, but that is a personal opinion.
So, Miquel, you're saying they got to form a stable government and go ahead with the roadmap of independence in 18 months.
They can. And
right.
as I
that
said
was
before,
that was the answer. Besides,
at some stage, a referendum has to be held because otherwise Europe would not respect the. We have to show that there is a majority will.
All right. And Yannis, so Miquel thinks, roadmap, ahead with the roadmap, 18 months, and a referendum to finally prove that there's this majority.
I think that you first need to know what you want, independence is not a goal in itself, right?
Exactly.
I guess people want independence in order to achieve other things.
Exactly.
I think that if you define very clearly what you want, then independence becomes only one of the possible options. It may become apparent that and I think that the electoral demographics would prove that if Catalonia sided with a non-conservative part of Spain, then eventually it would get what it needs, and what I think many Spanish people from outside Catalonia agree that it needs, which is to preserve its language, to preserve its currency, and to have a fairer financial system, right? Where basically there are less taxes going away from Catalonia. All these things can be achieved with a lot less than independence. If Catalonia gives its support, for example, to the Socialist Party, I agree, it's not a party with a very, very, very strong rhetoric of rise, Catalans, rise, and your blood will be boiling, and we hate them, and this kind of. So it's not a very poetic party. But if you think about it, the Estatut was agreed by the Zapatero government. If it was blocked. No, just 1 second. It was blocked by the Partido Popular, and it was blocked in the Tribunal Constitucional by the judges who were conservative, not by the non-conservative judges. If you vote for the socialists long enough, they will appoint their own judges in the Tribunal Constitucional. That's in every democracy. It's like that, right? Even in the Supreme Court, it
I just
matters.
wanted to say, Yannis, that you're not really answering the question. Did it was asking what the MPs at the Parliament of Junts pel Sí and CUP ought to do, not what the citizens of Catalonia ought to do in the next election.
They cannot do it. Okay, I'm sorry. They can't do anything because apart from going down the secessionist nationalist route, because it's the only thing that unites them. Try to manage an economy with a coup. It's going to be very difficult. Or if you're the coup, try to manage an economy with Artur Mas. It's going to be very difficult. The only thing you can do is, how do you do it? Throw things in the flames, make the fire bigger. The only thing you can do is make people hate the Spanish even more and remind them how Catalan they are. That's the only thing you can do, because you cannot manage an economy.
All right. So you here in the front, you were saying no.
My name is Jordi Villanova. My father was born in Paris of Catalan ascent. My mother was Swedish. I was born and brought up in England. So I think you might appreciate that my view of things is not sort of a local, parochial view of Catalonia. Okay. I'd like to do a bit of comparative politics here, since you're a political scientist. What led to the breakup of the Ottoman Empire, and why did Greece gain independence?
Jordi Villanova just asked Yannis what led to the breakup of the Ottoman Empire and what led to Greek independence, just for the audience.
Second question is, you started off, first thing you did was you started off questioning Catalan identity. You know, who's Catalan? What's Catalan? Are you Greek? I mean, you live outside Greece. Are you Greek? Are you Greek because you speak Greek? Or are there other factors that lead to your being Greek? In other words, I don't understand why you question what would be absolutely normal for Swedes, my Swedish half, French, or British, or English. I mean, nobody questions, what's an Englishman? An Englishman is an Englishman. I mean, nobody says, are you sure he's English if he lives abroad? I mean, that kind of thing is tendentious, clearly. Okay? And finally, why put all the onus on the Catalans? This is a good question, okay? Why put all the onus on the Catalans and hardly any on the Spanish? In other words, what we have to do is vote socialist, because then all our problems will be solved. Sounds very much like what you've been saying about our getting independence. And then,
Jordi, there's 3 questions in one. We probably can, or 4 in one. We probably can skip the one about the Ottoman Empire because that would probably. I don't know if we want to go to great lengths on that, but yeah, Jordi questioned whether you can apply the same standards of what being Greek means.
I think I can answer.
And what Catalan
to all 3 of them in one.
Wow,
is
with the ice cream, or
no, with the Ottoman Empire example.
All right, so then let's go with the Ottoman Empire.
Do you know how many people died because of Greece's war of independence with I'm not saying that there would be a war with Spain, right? I'm just saying. No. Wait. And no. I'm just saying. I'm just saying. In case you're saying that to make me feel Greek and proud that we became independent, I'm going to tell you right from the beginning that I'm not proud with what happened.
I'm questioning why you're not Turkish.
You want to know why? Because my ancestors happened to be Christian. The way we were separated from the Turks is because we were Christian. And people who were speaking Greek and who had only known Greece but happened to be Muslim were sent back to Turkey. Back. It was not back. They had never been to Turkey. They just had to go back. Right? And those who were Christian and who had never seen Greece, not them, not either for 2,000 years, right? These were Christian population, were called Greeks, and they had to be sent back. This is horrible. This is horrible. I don't
speak as Spanish and Catalan speak as Catalan. You're identifying. You're making this precisely this identity issue.
I'll tell you what. The issue of who is a Catalan and who is not a Catalan is a very important issue. It's not comparable to being Swedish or French because you just have them. Legally, it's not the same thing. Legally, you have to decide who is going to be a Catalan. Do you agree with that? We have Pujol's definition that a Catalan is someone who lives and works in Catalonia.
Look, I think that means
that Carles Bosch, who lives in Princeton, is not a Catalan.
I think you can probably argue over this over a beer later on. Let's not get caught on this because we are running out of time. Yeah. I really think it's a very interesting issue, but probably it can't be dealt with just between this moving forward. Just one more question. I believe there was a man over there. Let's just pick that one up, and after that we'll just go for a beer. We'll still be around here, and we can talk it over. Huh? All right. So Dan is asking if Catalonia had become independent around 1990 or 1995, how would it have dealt with the current economic crisis? Would policies have been different? Would a governmental response have been more efficient? I guess that's more of a question for Miquel in this case. I don't know if you want to take it as well.
It's a very, very, very simple answer. To my mind, the movement towards independence is not primarily an economic issue. Okay, not primarily an economic issue. It didn't arise out of economic issues. But in answer to your question, you don't have to be independent in Spain to come through the economic crisis with flying colours. And if you look at what's happened in the Basque Country and in Navarra, who raise their own taxes and administer their own taxes and pay central government for the shared services, they have done very, very much better. They have far lower levels of unemployment and far greater rates of growth. I insist that there are many other aspects of home rule which are outside that area. But in terms of being able to run your and to be responsible for administering your own taxes. The Basque Country and Navarra are a very, very clear answer, which, let's say, serves my cause well, but also serves you. Had Spain offered that kind of solution a few years back, perhaps a significant portion of the Catalan population would not be opting for independence now.
Yeah. Yannis, want to take it?
Yes, I think that if you compare, it depends really. I mean, it's a very counterfactual question, right? But if you compare Catalonia with other countries of about the size of Catalonia in the European Union, so that would be Ireland, Portugal, Greece. I'm not talking about former communist countries, right? They all had rather big difficulties. I'm not saying that Catalonia would necessarily have such big difficulties, because it's a little bit more. It didn't depend so much on the kind of foreign direct investment that Ireland depended. So that money, when it went away from Ireland, the Irish were left with nothing. Catalonia wouldn't have that. It would probably have its own productive, so its own means of production. It wouldn't suffer such a big recession, I think. But really, on the other hand, why would Catalonia be so different from all these kind of mid-sized countries? Perhaps it would be like Austria. So that's the optimistic thing, right? Perhaps Catalonia would really have done well. It's very close to France. It's very close to the important European markets, and perhaps it would have done like Austria. On the other hand, it's also conceivable that it would have done like the other peripheral countries. It depends. I don't know how things would have gone, but I think there's uncertainty there.
Yeah, Miquel wants to say still something. No, Austria or
before we finish, I would like to make one small comment.
If the differences are that big between the mentalities.
Yeah, because I think Dan was asking more of how the response from the Catalan government would have been in that event. But well, I mean, Ukrainians are always very, very difficult. So I mean, who knows what could have happened? I really find it very difficult that Catalonia could have attained independence in 1995. So who knows? No? And who knows if it will actually get it in the coming years? Actually, we had a very divided opinion here. You, Miquel, wanted to say something to close it up?
Just a couple of things. In 20 years' time, Catalonia, which is most definitely left of centre, if you look at the electorate as a whole, people won't remember what Convergencia stood for. I mean, it'll be a footnote in the history books. The whole political scene, I think, will change completely. And so I really look forward to not short-term views of politics in an independent Catalonia, but in the medium term, I think things will change very much. And the small elite which is in charge here, I hope, will be able to be contained by a new way of doing politics. And the other thing I'd like to say, if I may, is Locke. I know this because of Oriol Vidal Aparicio, who's a professor in the States. He's constitutionalist. And he looked at the two kinds of revolution that Locke talks about. And John Locke talks about a nationalist nation-building process, and another one which is much more based on good governance. If you look at the United States, all the founding documents are based on good governance, of doing things better than let's say the ruling class or the ruling power were doing. And his comment is that more and more the reasoning behind the pro-independence movement here is turning towards this material good governance arguments and away from the ethnic arguments, which would be basically, we want to be free because we have the right to be free, even if that means we're going to be poorer and we're going to have less economy. It doesn't matter, because we will be free, and we believe in that above everything else. That discourse just, I don't think exists. That's my opinion anyway.
Oh, Miquel got a quite long closing remark. I don't know if you want to say something to finish your intervention as well here.
I think Miquel is right. I think about 47 or 48% of the population might be free.
Well, okay, we'll leave it here. Thank you very much. Now we'll go for some beers. I think what's really great of a debate like this, that we can confront starting different opinions, but with some degree of respect, because what's important here is that I think both of our panelists here believe that things can be done better, and they want things to be done better in the future. They want Catalonia to be a better place in the future. They want also, I guess, both want Spain to be a better place in the future and Europe to be a better place in the future. So I guess, well, please don't forget to sign up for the meetup group of our future in Catalonia. If you enjoyed this debate, there will be more. There will be a 6th, there will be a 7th, there will be an 8th. Maybe here, maybe not. I'm not in charge of organizing or of deciding the place of the meetings, but I'm sure they'll be interesting as well. And I hope to see you all again in maybe another place, another time. And who knows whether in an independent Catalonia or in a Catalonia that is living way better in a different Spain as well. So thank you very much, and let's have some beers.